Okay, what I'm going to do in this video is just take a few minutes to go through some of the questions that a number of people missed and try to help you see things you can do to not make mistakes, not misread the question, or not be drawn to an option that's not correct. So let's look at this. Number one, the basic postulate of economics indicates that changes in incentives influence the what. Most important thing is to, when you get to a question, read it carefully. Um, don't just read over it quickly and then look at the options. Read the body of the question and think about it. Think about what we said about it in class, what you saw in the book, and then look at the options. And don't look for something that sounds plausible or something that kind of might make sense. Look for something that, yes, this is definitely something that is true based on what we've talked about. Okay, so the first chapter talked about the 10 big ideas. And behind all of those is the idea that the economic way of thinking provides you with certain principles that apply not just to a few people, not just to a few countries, but across history, across time. And one of the most important is that incentives are very important. They affect everybody. Everybody responds to incentives. I respond to incentives. I'm rushing to get this video done because I told you that if I didn't get it put up by 8 o'clock, I would have to pay you $10. I'm responding to incentives. We all do that, and we can sometimes change our own behavior by giving ourselves an incentive to do something that we think is good for us to do. So here, incentives influence actions of producers, but not consumers. No, we said incentives affect everybody. So that's not right. Choices of individuals only when they buy and sell goods in the marketplace. No, affect individuals throughout their lives. When you have an incentive to do something, that increases the chance that you're going to do it. C, choices of individuals with regard to a wide range of activities, including those generally perceived as social or political. Yes, we said that incentives have an impact on our behavior. All of us in every portion of our lives, incentives are important. We're not saying they're the only thing that's important, but they are important. They have an influence on us. D, actions of consumers, but not producers. Certainly not. That would not be correct. All right, number two, actually number 9. Suppose you have ordered a value meal at a local fast food restaurant. Okay. That doesn't give you a lot of information. So you've got to go ahead and read the rest of the question. The cashier asks you if you would like to supersize your meal. In order to make an efficient decision, you should compare. Okay, you've already decided you're going to purchase something, and now they're asking you, do you want the bigger? You want an option that's going to provide you with more. And anytime you're looking at, you're making a decision, you're comparing the benefits with the cost. And when you are thinking about increasing the size of something, or getting another slice of pizza, or spending another hour studying, you are dealing with marginal benefits and marginal cost. The idea is, what is the extra benefit of getting that supersized meal versus what is the extra cost? Notice I've spent a lot of time thinking about what the body of the question means before I looked at the options. That is very important to do. Get everything you can out of the body of the question before you look at the options, because the options may, you know that most of them are not right. So you don't want to spend most of your time thinking about sentences that aren't correct answers. Okay, so we're looking for which of these is definitely right. To make an efficient decision, you should compare the benefits of the smaller meal versus the additional benefits obtained from consuming the supersized meal. Now, you're not comparing the benefits of one meal with the additional benefits of the other. You've got to compare the additional benefits and the additional cost. The total cost, so that's not right. B, the total cost of the larger meal versus the additional cost to the restaurant. No, the cost to the restaurant, that's not relevant at all. Okay. And the total cost of the larger meal isn't what's important. What's important is if you do supersize your meal, how much more are you going to have to pay? And what's the extra benefit? So B is not correct. C, the additional cost of the larger meal versus the additional benefits received. That is exactly the idea. And the reason we emphasize things like this is because that is exactly what you do every day throughout the day when you're deciding how to spend your money, how to spend your time. You look at the options and you say, what's it going to cost me if I do this? What are the benefits? What am I giving up? What am I getting? Okay, we compare benefits versus cost, and we do that in marginal terms. And then D, the total cost of the larger supersized meal versus the total benefits received. Now, if we were just looking at the supersized meal and we weren't comparing it to the value meal, then we would look at the total cost versus the total benefits of the supersized. But here we're told we've already decided to get the value meal. The question is, should we supersize it? Should we make it bigger? So to answer that question, you've got to ask, what are the extra benefits? What are the extra costs? Notice you had to do a lot of thinking on this question. That's inescapable. To think clearly, you have to do a lot of thinking. That's the book I talked about, Thinking Fast and Slow. If you want to make good decisions, you have to be willing at times to use the slow system two thinking that Daniel Kahneman talks about. And especially in economics, that is the way to get the right answer. Take your time, go slow. If you do that, you will do much better than if you rush through the exam. All right. Number 11, entrepreneurial activity. We will get to, most of these are going to be supply and demand questions, but we'll get to those a little bit later. Entrepreneurial activity is encouraged by, well, remember what entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs look for new opportunities. They look for improved ways to produce things. They look for improved products to produce. They look for ways that they can provide something that somebody wants, and in doing that, make a profit. So notice we spent time thinking about what entrepreneurial activity is. It wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people read through that very quickly without even thinking about what is that. Okay? If that's what it is encouraged by what would lead to more entrepreneurial activity. High opportunity costs. What does that even mean? We did talk about opportunity cost, but that there's no reason to think that high opportunity cost would encourage entrepreneurial activity. So if you thought about it, you knew that doesn't really makes sense. Is encouraged by trade-offs. What does that mean? We always face trade-offs. How does that encourage entrepreneurial activity? Encouraged by absolute advantage. That is something we talked about, but this does not answer the question. So that there's no reason to think that would be the correct answer. We also talked about good institutions which protect private property rights. We said if we have a government and a legal system that defines who property belongs to, and that it protects their property rights, that creates good incentives. Because if you live in a country where your property rights are well protected, then you know if I start a business and I'm successful and I make a lot of profits, then I'll get to keep that. My wealth will go up. I will benefit from the sacrifice of running this business. Whereas, excuse me, if you live in a society where property rights are not protected, then you think, well, if I sacrifice and work hard at starting a business and I make a lot of profit, somebody's just going to take my wealth away from me. So why should I sacrifice? D was something we talked about. As you're answering a question, you read the body first, you think about it, and then when you get to these options, you're thinking about what did we talk about in class, and does the option answer the question that is being answered or is being asked. All right, number 32. This is probably the question that more people missed than any other question. So think about it carefully. First, you look at the graph. You look at the variable on each axis. Let's see, this is D1, D2, and it's piano lessons. We're talking about the demand for piano lessons. So this would be on this axis would be the number of hours of instruction that is demanded or are demanded, and this would be the price per hour of piano lessons. So D1 is here, D2 is here. Obviously, the demand curve has shifted to the right. You think, okay, that's an increase. Pardon me. You think that's an increase because for any given price, say $30, quantity demanded was here. Now it's going to be some greater quantity. Consumers want more piano lessons after this change occurs than before it occurred. So it's clear from the graph that there was an increase in the demand for piano lessons. Okay. Notice we spent all that time thinking about the graph. Now we're going to read the question. Which event would shift the demand curve for piano lessons from D1 to D2 as shown in the diagram? Okay. So we've already said that this was an increase in demand. So the question is, which of these events that are listed would cause the demand for piano lessons to increase? That's the question. A, an increase in the price of piano lessons. Okay. If the price of piano lessons goes up, then think about what is that going to do? What does it mean? It means that piano lessons are now more expensive than they were before. So what are people going to do? They're probably going to demand a smaller quantity of piano lessons. But that does not mean demand has shifted. Okay. Here, the main thing you need to remember is the difference between a shift of the demand curve and a movement along the demand curve. A is saying an increase in the price of piano lessons. Well, if the price of piano lessons goes up, say from $20 to $30, does that shift the demand for piano lessons? I hope you remember the answer is no. Because we got the price of piano lessons on this axis, quantity of lessons on this axis. If the price of the product you're looking at goes up, that does not shift the demand curve. It simply moves you along the demand curve. When the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. At 20 quantity or $20, it was going to be about what, 25 maybe. And if it goes up to 30, it drops down to maybe 19. Okay. Increase in the price does decrease the quantity demanded, but it doesn't shift the curve, and it certainly doesn't increase the demand. So that would be not correct. An increase in the price of pianos. Notice we are looking at the demand for lessons. This is a change in the price of pianos. So these are different things. If the price of pianos goes up, how is that going to demand or affect the demand for lessons? You have to ask yourself, what's the connection? What's the relationship between pianos and lessons? And what hopefully you remember that this would be an example of complements, two things that you tend to use together. The piano, if you don't know how to play it, having the piano doesn't do you too much good unless you get some lessons. Having piano lessons certainly doesn't do you any good if you don't have a piano. So they tend to go together. And we said that if the price, so here this is an increase in the price of a complement good. It's not an increase in the price of this good. It's an increase in the price of a complement. And hopefully you remembered that when the price of a complement changes, then the demand for the other good is going to shift. If the price of pianos goes up, the demand for lessons will change, but it's not going to increase. Okay? If pianos are now more expensive, there are going to be fewer people who have pianos and fewer people who want lessons. So B would change demand, would shift the curve, but it decreases it, not increase. So that would not be correct. C, a decrease in the price of piano lessons. My guess is that a lot of people put that, thinking that if the price of piano lessons goes down, then the demand for lessons would go up. And that is mistaking a change in quantity demanded for a change in demand. When the price of lessons goes down, as we have in C, that will cause people to want more lessons. That's an increase in the quantity demanded, but it doesn't shift the curve. And what we have here is a change, is something that shifts the whole demand curve. So that would not be correct. And then finally, we have D. Hopefully it's right because it's the last one. A decrease in the price of pianos. We've already said pianos and piano lessons are complements. That people tend to use them together. And so if the price of pianos goes down, that is going to shift the demand curve for lessons. And since pianos will be cheaper, more people will buy pianos, and that means more of those people will want lessons. The demand for lessens will increase. It will shift to the right because this is a change in the price of a complement good. You might think, how am I supposed to know that? Well, remember we talked about the shift factors for demand and the shift factors for supply. And those are very important to understand and remember. And remember, you do have your, you can have a 3x5 card on the exam. You can write down things like this. But primarily, if you understand the logic of it, you should be able to reason your way through it. And again, the most important thing here was that this was an increase in demand. So only something that shifted the curve would be a correct answer, and a change in the price of lessons would not shift the curve. It would just cause you to move down along the curve. Okay. All right. Another supply and demand question. If, as always, read the question carefully. Don't get in a rush. I hope you're getting tired of me saying that. It's very important. Don't forget it. If, and I would encourage you to underline things that are important on the question. If producers form expectations that copper prices will be higher in the future, okay, then this will shift what? So think about what's happening. It's the producers whose expectations have now changed. The consumers, as far as we know, their expectations haven't changed. It's the producers whose expectations have changed. And so it is the producers whose behavior is going to change. And what does the supply curve show you? It shows you, it describes producer behavior. So just from the fact that it's producers who are changing their expectations, should have told you that it's the supply curve for this product that is going to change, going to shift. And now we have to ask, well, which way is it going to shift? Is this going to lead to an increase or a decrease in supply? So here, drawn a graph. The producers now expect that copper prices are going to be higher in the future. We are looking at demand for supply and demand for copper. So this would be the quantity of copper. This would be the price of copper. Okay. This would be the equilibrium price of copper. I encourage you to always identify the equilibrium. Even we may not need it in this question, but it's just good practice, because if you go, every time you draw a graph, every time you think through it, every time you talk through it, you are causing these ideas to literally burn into your neural circuits. Economics changes your brain, and the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, you go through it, the more it will be a permanent part of your brain, and you won't forget it on the exam. And hopefully you won't forget it after you leave this course, although you may want to. Okay, so it's supply is going to shift. Is it going to be an increase or a decrease? Well, if copper prices are going to be higher in the future, think about what that means for copper producers. Let's say, I have no idea what copper is selling for. Let's say it's, I don't know. $3 an ounce. It's probably ridiculously off, but $3 an ounce. What if so that means that copper producers who sell their copper today can sell it for $3 an ounce. but they now think it's going to be higher in the future. So let's say they believe that in the near future, the price is going to go up to $10 per pound. Well, what would you do? You're producing this product. You can sell it for $3 today, or you can hold on to it for a while and sell it for $10 a pound. You want $3, you want $10. Well, you'd prefer $10. So that means that producers who believe the price is going to be higher in the future have an incentive to cut back and not supply as much now as before. Why? They cut back and they sell less now so that in the future they will have more available to sell. So anytime the producers expect prices to go up, then supply decreases, it shifts to the left or up. And notice what happens to the price. Equilibrium was here. The price will start to go up even in the present. So important principle there, when people start to think the price of something is going to go up in the future, or if producers think that, then they adjust their behavior and the price will actually start to go up in the present. Okay, demand did not shift, supply did not shift to the right. The supply curve shifted to the left or up. It actually to the left and up, did both. Okay. Number 43. And blank, this one requires you to do a lot of work. And blank causes the equilibrium price to something and the equilibrium quantity to something. Okay? This is a very, very easy problem. Lots of people missed it, but it's a very easy problem. The only difficult thing about it is that it does require you to do a lot of work. It's a lot of easy work, but it requires a lot of work. And if you just kind of take a guess at what's going to happen, you're likely to get it wrong. You need to draw not one graph, but 4 graphs, because we have 4 different situations to look at. So you look at each one separately, you draw a graph for each, and you see what happens. It's not hard. When you encounter this on a future exam, you can get it right if you're willing to follow the process that I'm going to lay out. It's just that simple. If you follow the process, you'll get the right answer. If you don't follow it, good chance you'll make a mistake. So we look at each one separately, and we don't stop until we're finished. There should be only one correct answer, but one way to check yourself to make sure you haven't made a mistake is by working all of them and confirming that you only find one that is correct. If you find 2 that seem correct, well, either I made a mistake and put 2 answers there, or one of your answers is wrong and you have to figure out which one is right. All right. An increase in demand. Well, increase in demand, what does that mean? It means that the demand curve shifts and it increases to the right. So that means it's going to do that. Once you draw in the new demand curve, it is right there in front of you. What happens to the equilibrium? We started here, you're going to move to there. What happens to the quantity? It goes up. What happens to the price? It goes up. If there's an increase in demand, quantity demanded goes up and the price goes up. Is that what A says? A says an increase in demand will cause the price to rise. That's true. And the quantity to fall. No, that's not right. So that's not correct. You're not looking for an option where part of it is right. You're looking for an answer that is completely right. So that's wrong. B, a decrease in supply. What's that going to do? Let's answer that down here. A decrease in supply, well, that means supply curve is going to shift. And if it's a decrease, that means the supply curve is shifting to the left and up. Once you draw in the new supply curve, the answer is there because you know the equilibrium is going to be at the intersection of the new supply curve and the original demand curve. Okay. So what happened to the price? It went up. What happened to the quantity? It went down. B says a decrease in supply will cause the price to rise. That's true. And cause the quantity to fall. Looks like that's true as well. So let's circle that one. It looks like that's right. We could have made a mistake. So let's check the others. An increase in supply. What does that mean? It means this supply shifts. And if it's an increase, that means to the right or down. And what happens to equilibrium? Moves from here down to there. Quantity goes up. The price goes down. What does C say? An increase in supply causes the price to rise. No, that didn't happen. So that's wrong. And then D, a decrease in demand. Well, what does that do? Well, that means demand curve is shifting. A decrease means it's shifting to the left. And the equilibrium moves from here to there. What happened to the price? Goes down. What happens to the quantity? It goes down. D says a decrease in demand will cause the price to fall. That's true. And cause the quantity to rise. No, that's not true. So that's wrong. We have one option that is correct. None of that was hard. You can do this. But how many of you, if you miss this, did you draw even one graph, much less four? Okay. You draw the graphs, you work through it one step at a time, you will get the right answer. There is no guesswork involved. So you can either do the work, as I've shown here, or you can guess. And guessing is not a good strategy if you want to pass, which I hope you do. I certainly want you to pass. All right, and then I think this is the last one. If the market price, read it carefully, if the market price is below the equilibrium price, we've got two different prices we're talking about here. Which of the following will occur? Do not look at any of the answers. You're given a scenario. The market price is below the equilibrium price. Figure out what does that look like with the graph. We spent a lot of time learning to use the graph. If you don't draw the graph, then you're missing out on the whole point of the class. You're learning a tool for figuring things out. You're not looking for an option that looks good. You figure out what is going to happen, and then you look for an option where that matches what is actually going to happen. Okay, so we need a graph. So here's a graph. And we now go back and reread the question. If the market price is below the equilibrium, okay, well, let's look at the graph. We got demand, we got supply. That makes sense. We've got the quantity on this axis, price on this axis. The red dot is the equilibrium price. And at equilibrium, what is always true? The quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal. We have a balance. Are we told we're in equilibrium? No, we're told that we have a situation where the market price, that means the price at which the product is actually being sold, is below the equilibrium price. Okay. So let's just put in some numbers. Let's say that the price of gas, let's say the equilibrium price is $3. Okay. That doesn't mean that that is the actual price that it's being sold at now. It means that is the price which will balance quantity supplied and quantity demanded. If the market price is below the equilibrium price, then that means the current price that's actually being charged is somewhere down here. Let's say $2 per gallon. Okay, so this is simply a question of, if the price is down here, what's going to happen? And we say, okay, $2 is right in here. So how do we use the graph? We read horizontally over to the supply curve, and that tells us the quantity that producers will be willing to supply at that $2 price. Let's say it's 300,000 units. Okay, this quantity is 300,000. What do we do now? Sometimes people get halfway, they get to this, and then they're not quite sure what to do, or they'll look at the equilibrium. Okay, no, don't look at equilibrium yet. We want to know what is going to happen at this current price of $2. We read to the supply curve and down, and that told us the quantity producers would be willing to supply. But now we have to know, well, what about consumers? What are they going to do? So we read horizontally over to the demand curve. We read down. That is the quantity demanded at this $2 price. Obviously, it's a lot bigger than 300. Let's say it's 700. So now we know something. We know that if the price is both the market price is below the equilibrium price, then the quantity demanded is going to be greater than the quantity supplied. Okay. And that was one of the big things we talked about. Think about when you have something like this, think about, what do these letters, terms mean? Quantity demanded, that's the amount that consumers want to buy at the current price. Quantity supplied is the amount that the producers want to sell at the current market price. And we said that if consumers want to buy more than producers want to sell, then that is a shortage. That is a shortage. And we then ask, or in class, we talked about what would happen if we have a free market and there's a shortage. That means there's an imbalance. Consumers are trying to buy more than is available. What is that going to lead to? What will automatically happen? And we said, when you have a shortage in a free market, what happens is always the same. There's going to be an adjustment to get us back into balance, to get us back to equilibrium. And that adjustment is that the price of the product is going to go up. Producers don't have to be told to do it. It's in their interest to raise the price. They'll get more per unit, and they're going to be able to sell more than they wanted to sell. Even they wanted to sell only 300. They can raise the price, and they're going to be able to sell even more than 300. As the price goes up, producers respond to that rising price by being willing to supply a larger quantity. Notice this is not a change in supply. It's not a shift of the curve. It is a movement along the supply curve. It's a change in the quantity supply. Likewise, as the price goes up, consumers respond to that signal. It tells the consumers gas is much more costly than it was before. It gives them an incentive to cut back. So the quantity demanded goes down. The higher price is motivating consumers to cut back on the quantity demanded. That's a movement up the demand curve. The shortage that existed at the low price, it's getting smaller and smaller as the price goes up. And once we reach the equilibrium, then quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. The shortage has been eliminated. Notice we've done all of this work without even looking at any of the answers. People spend way too much time looking at the answers. Most of the answers are wrong. It doesn't make sense to focus on that. Focus on the information you're given. Focus on what you know from class. You know that the supply and demand framework looks like this and it works like this. So you read the question, the body of the question carefully, you draw the graph, you do all this work thinking through it, and then you look at each option to see which one is correct. Quantity supplied will exceed quantity demanded. Is that true? Quantity supplied greater than quantity demanded. No, that's the opposite. No, it's very easy to misread it and think this is right. And when you start out in economics, you'll make those mistakes. But trust me, you spend enough time going through these things, you won't make those mistakes. B, quantity demanded will exceed quantity supplied. Well, that's true. That part is true. But what about the second part? And the market price will eventually fall. Okay. Does a shortage lead to a lower price? No. Price goes up. So even though the first part is correct, second part is not, B is not the right answer. Now, don't be tempted by an option just because part of it sounds familiar. You're not looking for something that sounds familiar. You're looking for an answer that is completely correct. See, quantity demanded will exceed quantity supplied. Yeah, that's true. See, by laying this out here, every time you look at one of these, you can read it and then compare it to this, and you see whether it's true or not. This part is right. Quantity demanded will exceed quantity supplied, and the market price will eventually rise. Well, that is what happens. So it looks like this is the right answer. But if we're serious about doing well on the exam, we should take a few more seconds and look at the last option. Quantity supplied will exceed quantity demanded. No, that's not right. So this is incorrect. C is the correct answer. This analysis is not rocket science. It's not that hard, but you have to approach it the right way. And Achieve gives you lots of practice at approaching it the right way. If you take shortcuts, you can finish faster, but you are not going to do as well. And you may end up having to go through the course 2 times. You don't want to do that. Take your time now so you do well on the exam. That's the way to get through the course fast. Okay. And it looks like that is the last question I wanted to go through. I hope this has been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions.